how do you get to thinking independently?
Well, let's start with this. I know as you grow up, your brain's very raw. Like you don't really have a formulated opinion yet. Especially like even below, like even at 25, like I don't even have, a lot of opinions are still, I'm still working on to formulate those. But you have to remember that social media, school, and family members are like the greatest influences in your life, right? They influence our principles, our morals, and like how we move in this world, right? And that can prevent you from exploring your great ideas. So you always want to be careful of what you consume because sometimes what you consume can be shit, excuse my language, but it's true. And in order to think independently, you kind of have to go back and question those things that you were taught, question those things that you were told that were true. Because unless you have experienced it firsthand or you have proof, then how can you know that's abundantly true? Like, how can you know that's exactly true? You don't. So learning to think independently comes from, questioning everything that you pretty much have learned and double checking them to see if they were right.
How do you double check them?
So let's say, well, I'll use this example. Like, let's say that, you see a statistic that says, 50% of Americans, have less than $5,000 in savings, right?
Mhm.
Where can you go find that information? You have the internet right in front of you. So what I would do is when I see that statistic, I don't accept it, right? Me being a very curious person, I wouldn't accept that. I'd be like, okay, let me go on the internet and do my own research. So there's little things like that, especially like when people tell you things that are presumed to be facts. Like, for example, that we'll say that high school X is better than high school Y, and the history shows that high school X has more championships than high school Y. But until you actually go back and do your due diligence, you wouldn't know that's true. So a big part of double checking your work is doing your due diligence, and there's plenty of outlets to go figure that out.
I feel like
In terms of, oh, go ahead.
I feel like there's people who wouldn't double check and feel like that everything that they see is right, and there's people who uh I feel like those are the same people who spread rumors. Is there any help for them, or is it kind of the only people who are curious is the only people who kind of double check?
Well, there's this one thing I heard online once from this entrepreneur. He was saying how people have to pay down their ignorance debt. And what that means is that, our whole life, like I said, we're taught these things and we have to unlearn these things in order to think independently. And the ignorance that could be something that's passed down from a family member or, what your current environment is. So for example, let's say money, because money is like the best example you can use. Let's say somebody believes that, okay, you have to go to school, you have to get a 9 to 5 job, you have to make $50,000 a year and pay off your debt for the next 40 years or whatever. And that's the only way that you're able to live in America, right? That's the right way to live in America. But ignorance, the person who learned that was ignorant to the fact that there are multiple ways to make income, and you don't have to be a millionaire, right? In order to live a free life, in a sense, there are plenty of ways to, you know, essentially live without restraint. But going back to ignorance, that it's like you have to, as that's passed on, somebody in the family has to pay that down. So if your parents taught you that notion, you as a person have to unlearn what your parents taught you, come back to the idea and relearn other avenues where you can make money and essentially become financially free or become your own boss or whatever the case may be, pay off your debt early, etc. Like there's little things in life that you have to unlearn before you relearn them. And part of that is getting to a point where you're like kind of fed up. You're just like, I don't understand why this is. And then you start questioning it. So it comes from a place of emotion. It's like, why is this the way it is? And you have like this emotion that you're feeling, and it connects with your brain. It's like, why is this happening? It starts with the question of why. And then from why it becomes how.
There's so many people who envy those type of people because I feel like the the type of people like Warren Buffett, the Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musk are they're curious to do those things, and that's why they become so successful because they're always willing to learn more, 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 more. But there's also people who don't want to do that and don't want to put in the effort and don't want to try to do those type of things. And going from that, is there any way for those people to kind of get into the curiosity mindset? Is there any way you would try to get people to ask questions? Or I mean, going to from that other question, is there any way to get those people to become that way, or are they kind of just stuck in that kind of mindset?
Right. I think what's more important is that, it's not that what you know, it's like your willingness to know more. And if people have that willingness, they tend to, eventually and inevitably get to that point where they want to ask those questions and question it. And the only thing that you can do, as a human is question them. Maybe not their morals and philosophy, but ask them questions, right? You want them to, in order to get somebody to think, and teachers do this all the time at school. It's like, how do you get your students to kind of think? You ask them a question because they might already have a preconceived answer. And in order to question, order to get them to question themselves, you have to ask those thought provoking questions. So, in short, the only way you can get people to think like that is to ask them the right questions or ask them the thought provoking questions.
All right. Your second quote was get good at sales.
Yes. And what I mean by sales, I don't necessarily mean cold calling, but you need to convince other people of what you believe in order to sell your vision. So when I think of how to sell an idea, I think of three important components. And this has worked for me, so I hope it works for you guys as well. It's that, you have to ask yourself, like, what value does your idea provide for others? How am I helping other people? Why would they want to invest, in my idea? The second part would be the data to support your claim. Like, what data shows that this thing will work for these people and possibly more? Like, where is there room for, a market? Like, where is there room for me to be in this market? And then ultimately, in order for people to believe in your vision, your idea, the most part is like emotion. Like, what emotion do you evoke out of others? Like, what emotion do you elicit? Like, if I'm speaking to someone about an idea and I don't really have much confidence behind it, what makes you think that person will have confidence too? It's the conviction that you speak it's the conviction that you speak behind your words that people will believe in. And that's why they ultimately, listen. That is probably the most important part, is like the conviction. Because if you believe in it enough, that emotion will transfer into the person that you're speaking to, or the crowd, or the group, or the people that you want to connect with. So getting good at sales is more so, eliciting that emotion, like to provoke people to feel a certain way.
Are you doing that in your life, or does that play a big part in your life?
Absolutely. I would say me making these short form videos has helped me, you know, help me express the emotion and help pull the emotion out of people. So when I make these videos, for example, I want people to feel what I'm saying, right? Not necessarily just understand. I want them to understand, obviously, because that's the whole point, is providing value, and value cannot transfer if people do not understand. But I want them to feel it too. I want them to feel that, these things will help them or help others, or they can pass it on to the next person. And by me doing the videos every day, I learned more, little things that people do understand or do, feel for.
How do you
So,
th- how do you
yes.
think more people could add that get good at sales in their day to day life? Do you think people could, try to do that?
Yeah, I think as a rookie in sales, people tend to speak more because you want to sell people. But what I've learned is that you want to, ask those thought provoking questions, build those relationships. I think the people think I go into sales to sell people, but in reality, going into sales is building those relationships and providing value to those people in hopes or that will eventually lead to a sale because you provide so much value that they will eventually need your services at some point. It's just a matter of when. And when impatience comes with, trying to sell somebody, say an idea or whatever the case, but that impatience will kind of deter you from actually building those really good relationships.